So before we can transfer the beer from the fermenters to the kegs, we need a line to do it. I have this line so that it plugs in here easily and can go into the keg. This is cleaned every time after I use it, so all I need to do now is sanitize it. So I prefer to keep a sodium metabisulfate mixture in here. Make sure that no one drinks from it, but pretty much give everything a good coating. Better than what I'm doing, but make sure that everything gets coated with the solution. With all beer things, sanitizing and cleanliness is the absolute key. Otherwise you get infections in the beer and it just doesn't taste good. So now this is clean. We're ready to start kegging. Before we know that the beer is ready to be kegged, we need to check its specific gravity again. So you should have done this when you first made the beer, and what you want is the level to be stable for 2 days in a row. It should generally be around 1.008. That's what it should be, depending what you put in there. But when it comes down to it, it just needs to be stable for 2 days. Generally after a week, but you know, it might not be. So you get a little bit of beer out. Alright, sometimes if you've got heaps of froth like this, it's hard to read. So if you stick your finger in and make the beer overflow, it gets rid of the froth. I don't know how well you can see this, but I can see that as 1.006. It's been like that for a few days, so it's good to beer, good to keg. Maybe even drink. So that was a Cooper's Lager, and it's not too shabby. Alright, so now we're going to tap the beer from the fermenter to the keg. You might notice here though that this fermenter is sitting on a bit of an angle. Whenever you ferment beer, there's always sediment which is involved. It usually ends up to take up about a litre worth of space. But if you put the fermenter on a block like this, most of the sediment sits towards the back of it, so that when you're pouring the beer into here, you avoid most of the sediment. So that's a good little trick. Whenever you're doing this, try to avoid much movement. So I need to move the fermenter closer to the keg, but I'll be doing it very carefully to try and not to disturb the sediment. So everything's been clean and sanitized. We're good to go now. Before I do this, I make it a good habit to record what I'm doing. So at the moment, the beer from Cassie, which is up here, is going into keg number 3. So if I had a pen, I'd write keg 3 here. Oh, I have one. Write 3. I'd write the date that I do it, the specific gravity, and what the temperature is. So at the moment the keg's I'm going to say 25 degrees, and keeping a database of information like this is good for making more beer. So everything's in, ready and good to go. Before we do it though, it's important to undo the airlock, otherwise it'll suck this water into the beer, and I don't know what that'll do. Once you've done that, let it go. So with this, it's important to make sure that the beer doesn't come out too fast and that it doesn't really bounce and splash around in the keg. So my line length is the right length it needs to be, and it almost kind of curls around in the shape of the keg to make it spin anti-clockwise. Alright, as we get to a certain level here, you'll see that the beer is almost about to stop flowing. So if we move this chock out, the beer can continue to flow. If you don't get there in time, and the beer line comes below the valve here, it can actually stop, and you need to do a few little tricks to get it going, but I won't get into that. So the main thing is to make sure that there's always beer above this tap here. So as it gets a bit lower, you'll need to actually lean the whole keg downwards a bit, like this. Being careful not to interrupt the sediment. I don't know how much you can see, but in this post here, you can probably see the bottom of it, and you want to fill up the beer so it's about 10 millimeters below the that thing. I don't know what you call it, post. So that looks like it's about right, so we'll turn this off. And that's pretty much it. So while you're filling up the keg, it's really important to make sure you don't drop anything, no hair, no skin. You need to make sure that this is all really clean and sanitized. So if you're doing a multiple keg system, you can take this straight out of here, drop it in here, and now that's ready for the next one. But before we can do this, we need to look after this. Beer doesn't like oxygen, so it's best to get all the oxygen out straight away. And to do that, we're going to purge it. I will show you that on the next video. So to close this, it's pretty simple. You make sure it's a nice tight seal, lock it down, and make sure that this relief valve is not open, but closed.